Okay, so today we're going to discuss sun woo, excuse me, in a hopefully in a manner that won't get me kicked off of the tube, and we'll get and still be able to get the information across. And so we'll discuss the sun, and you will recognize that that is the that's Sol, and there's our solar corona, and that also relates to okay, so the sun connection cyclically is very involved with a lot of the stuff that's going on at the moment. Not only the climate change, which we're now seeing as an issue relative to North America and other parts of the Northern Hemisphere, but also with disease cycles. And we have disease cycles in a periodic basis that's reflecting of where we are within the sun cycle. Now at the moment, we're within a solar cycle that has got a bunch of things going for it, so to speak. It's a low ebb. It was due to be a minimum anyway. And then coincidentally, cyclically, time-wise, we're at a 120-year cycle of solar activity, which takes us back to the beginning of the last century, where we had another one of these disease issue periods. We're also at a 12,000-year cycle period. It's actually like 11,700 years, something like that, of solar cycles that relate to the climate here on the planet. So as the sun puts out more energy, we get a situation where the Earth warms. And the Earth has been a lot warmer than it is with humans on it now, if we are to believe that no humans existed 50,000 years ago, or 200,000 years ago, or 500,000 years ago, that kind of thing, right? Because those cycles had greenhouse gases much higher than we have now, multiples of what we have now. And in addition, they also had periods of warming much larger than we have enjoyed in this last century. It's my opinion that we're going into an ice age. You know, no coincidence. I mean, the Texans would probably agree with me. And that this ice age is entirely due to where we are within the solar activity. Basically, this 11,700 and some odd year cycle has the sun with a diminished corona. So it's now only out here at 3,000 degrees Kelvin. Should be 5,000, which means it would be further on out. And the issue is that if the sun is moving this way, so we have more room, the planets are way, can we see that? Yeah, the planets are way out here, right? We're way the hell away from the sun, but we're basically being drug along in this comet-like tail of the sun. And now, with the corona reduced, we see that the sun has a much smaller, well, for us, protective layer that extends back, and so more cosmic energy is getting around that to come back in here and impact the planets. And that's fundamentally, very simply, that's what's going on with all of the planets. That's global warming on Mercury, global warming on Mars, Venus, everybody. Okay, or climate change, whatever. I would agree with the term climate change, but not the way that the powers that be use it and the connotation they're trying to put into it that it's all humans' fault. Humans have nothing to do with it. We can have carbon taxes until we produce no carbon dioxide, in which case all life dies. We would die long before that point, right? Just because of other issues, we would die long before that point if we shut down our carbon emissions. But in any event, though, so we're getting more radiation. That radiation is also associated with these uptick in disease cycles. 1918, for instance, was exactly the same kind of situation we have now, only those people didn't face a grand solar minimum. We face a grand solar minimum. So not only do we have this little 120-year cycle, the 100-year cycle, we've got this grand solar minimum cycle, which goes to like the Maunder minimum and some of these others, which were quite lengthy. So it's my estimation that this period of time we're in will produce a solar diminishment, as I've illustrated, that will continue for a century at least, if we are lucky. And it will peak out and then gradually return as the sun moves into a new area of space. Fundamentally, we're hitting a debris field out here that's causing this extra radiation. The Russians have been quite open about this and voluminous in in the writing about it since probably the late 80s. Anyway, though, so we should be into a new area of space over the course of this 100 years. Now, it may be that we're going to face a serious minimum. There's just no way to predict it from where we are now. A serious grand solar minimum would be 425 years at a minimum. We may face that, but there's no way to ascertain that at this point. We're going into an ice age, and even in the midst of the ice age, we won't be able to determine how long it's going to last until conditions change within the corona. And that'll be a good key for us going forward. Now, this corona, the solar corona, relates to the other one that I wanted to discuss, because these two are linked. As I said, there are cycles. And I wanted to discuss this relative to a particular subject that I get into trouble on a discussion about. So back when the CCP, the Communist, or the Chinese Communist Party, went batshit as a result of stuff going on in Wuhan and Hubei, and then ultimately all over, and then we discover it was one of these critters that was causing it. I decided in January that, okay, I'd better figure this out, because it's a complex subject and it's too easy for people to lie to you. Way too easy for people to lie to you. So I purchased this course. I've got the other volume of it here. And in addition to that, I got cell and molecular biology, which filled in a lot of the gaps that I needed to do so in order to take this course. Now, the interesting part is that Vincent Racaniello is, he does a whole series of videos. So there's a whole series of videos that go along with this. This principles book is the textbook for a advanced college level discussion of this within the general category of medicine. And it was, these guys are at Columbia University, the producer of this. And it's an interesting book. I kind of like, well, I wanted to say it was, it's a little too much comic book kind of stuff. If there hadn't been so many illustrations, I could have gotten through it quicker. The illustrations do help. The tables, certainly, no questions about it. But I understand why they put in all of the illustrations, because a lot of these people will be dealing with this thing and they want to be able to recognize these in this form by sight, okay? Because the illustrations deal with the actual rendered images that we'll be getting out of our test gear for this particular subject of these particular specimens. So we'll call this a specimen, okay? And so our specimen in this particular instance arose as a result of what I saw happening in Wuhan and Hubei on the deep web over the course of October, November, and December 2019. So we're now here. We're at this point where we've all got to deal with this, and there's some things that people need to know. All of this does relate to the sun and its other issues as well. We'll get around to that in a second because it all comes back to the weather. But in the smaller level of these specimens that we have to deal with, we know that two things now: that the introduction of masks is introducing breathing problems in and of themselves. Okay, in and of themselves, they're producing breathing problems just from the particulates, the broken fibers of the paper, the broken fibers of the insulation, the broken fibers of the cloth, as well as bacterial contamination, etc. So there is some segment of the population that's being made sick by those now, just having to wear them. We also know that the approach in using masks is entirely political theater because there's no science to support any of it. All right, the only people that should be wearing masks, as I've maintained all along, are people that are caregivers, are ill, or are going to be in contact with those. And that's only if you suspect that your vitamin D levels are low. All right, so we now know from more studies in Spain and some new ones in Italy that vitamin D is both a treatment and a preventative that is really safe. It's not at a drug level. It's even cheaper than like ivermectin or hydrochloroquinone. And you can keep it going perpetually. You can keep taking it. And we also now know that you need to do so, okay? Because the critter that's the subject of this, there was not just one that tiptoed out of that facility in Wuhan. It appears that there were 4, 3 other variants, and the principal one that's gotten all around. Now, there's other additional issues. This is novel, which is to say it was created, and this novel specimen is out and about, and it's learning to do new tricks. So my mind is not yet settled that it will be unable to become more lethal. Usually they don't mutate that way. Usually they mutate off until they're just enough of an annoyance, but they keep perpetuating themselves in the population. They don't kill off the host. We may find that that's not the case here because this was designed as a bioweapon. So it may indeed mutate that way. I'm suspecting that this is the case because of the ease with which it jumps species. That's radically unusual, okay? So we can get rabies if we're attacked and bitten, but we can't pick up rabies in the environment in a meaningful way as one of these specimens and become affected by it, just the way things work. Now, for us guys, something to know right off is even with the plethora of variants out there and the fact that these may themselves now start actually mutating, we still have the reassurance that because it was a shell of that particular specimen, we know that the approach we're taking is solid. That 40 nanograms really should be 47, all right? And I'll get to that in a second. 40 nanograms per milliliter of vitamin D is proof. If you've got that level in your blood, you're not susceptible to this. There's not been anybody that's reported to any hospital on the planet with 47 nanograms per milliliter measured vitamin D levels. Now there's a couple of weirdnesses with the tests. You got to be careful about that. So, you know, one outfit can measure your blood on their test and you're a 43, and another one can measure it and you're a 64. And so it's like, well, this is why it's a good thing to use multiple tests and do this over several months to get a moving average. I always like doing my moving averages through winter so that I can determine what it takes to keep it up in the absence of sunlight. Which gets us back to the sun. Anyway, though, so 40 nanograms is absolute baseline for health. 60 to 90 is the low end. Now you got a lot of the top performing nutritionists and these kind of people saying that, well, humans really ought to be between 90 and 120 nanograms per milliliter of vitamin D if we're to replicate the health of our ancient ancestors. And so that's a good target to shoot for. Every body is different. Every body's condition is going to be different. Vitamin D is used in at least 3,000, is used in 3,000 metabolic processes that we have identified. So it gets used up real quick. So you got to keep on a steady diet of it. You know, compliance really is key to safety in this particular region where we have to deal with this sort of an issue, right? And the whole fact that this was engineered by humans and falls within the bailiwick of this whole large subject should be very scary to everyone, all right? And the fact that we haven't had millions dead may just be millions dead so far. Vitamin D every day, and vitamin C. Vitamin C, you can just go 22 milligrams per pound body weight. Take that every day and you're at optimal levels. You don't have to measure vitamin C in the blood in order to obtain a reading. You can take too much of it and your stomach will let you know. Vitamin D, on the other hand, you do need to know how fast your body's using it. So I had colon cancer, and that affects both my ability to uptake vitamin D and its use. Therefore, I've been able to monitor it, and I know how much I have to take every day to maintain myself well up into the 60s. And it's difficult. It's, you know, you have to really gulp the stuff and have particular bodies in order to raise it much over the 60s, especially as you age. Aging people have a real issue with vitamin D. Both, you know, making it through the skin because you have to have fat in order to get the cholesterol, in order to then be able to make the vitamin D. But that's really the natural process. There's other parts of the cholesterol that's broken down and used for other good things for you. So, this part of the discussion still continues on with the specimen being our particular protagonist, okay? And so now, at this moment, we're facing some stuff that's relative to the woo drawing I drew the other day. So over February, starting on the 24th, we get this rapid rise in emotional tension. It bloops up a bit, and then it goes kind of like that and continues out some time. Within that rise of emotional tension in the language are forecasts that the mainstream media is going to run into some real shit. They're going to run into some real shit for their particular approach to supporting the product that is used against the specimen. All right, so because they've been downplaying, so the only people that are seriously interested in the product and the people that are really freaked out are the people that are, you know, totally into like the mask area. They've been inculcated and brainwashed to a certain extent to view the specimen and its effect on the body in a particular way. Lots of other people don't see things that way. But regardless, we are now dealing with variants of the specimen, and we don't know how deadly they may or may not be until we go through an encounter with them. But we do know that the base support for them is within the vitamin realm. We're now starting to see the vitamin studies come on out, be distributed in various different kinds of newspapers, usually basically shit rags, because they're the only ones that are willing to print something that runs against the MSM. Now, the mainstream media has a real problem. They don't know it yet, but sometime after the 24th, likely, here of February, we're going to get to a point where the product used to defend against the specimen will break out in a very bad way to such an extent that the MSM is going to having to start doing some CYA activity. They're going to have to cover their asses in a serious way, okay? Because the product has a real issue, and the real issue is not what's being reported. Okay, there's lots and lots and lots of problems with the product. The product does not, it doesn't do well, it doesn't travel well, it has to be super refrigerated. They've had all of these issues with it, and now it's going to come on out that not only is there a problem with the, what do they call that? It's pathogenic priming. Pathogenic priming is priming every cell in your body to respond to the specimen as soon as one cell is infected with the specimen. We now know that you can take the product and it does not remove the potential for being infected by the specimen, nor does it remove the potential for, if you are infected, for spreading the specimen. So the product doesn't do any of that at all. It's not intended to address that. It doesn't do anything along those lines. What it does do is the pathogenic priming, where every cell in your body becomes instantly or able to respond when one cell is infected. Now, if you were to go and take this course as I have, and you read in this, you will discover within the first 2 chapters of instruction here that our particular specimens, all specimens in this category of life form, it's not really life form, but in this category of thing, all of these specimens invade and infect through a process that involves time, all right? So one cell gets infected, it gets hijacked, and it makes a bunch of the specimens. They come specimen parts. The cell ruptures open, and those specimen parts come on out and are glued together into specimens by the nature of the specimen itself, right? So specimens are very interesting. They're not like bacteria or amoeba. They don't split to make new ones. What they do is and this comes to the key of it, okay? So the specimen goes to the cell, and the specimen attacks the cell and comes in through the cell wall. When it comes in here, it finds one of the native products, will come on up to it, and it provides that guy with a blueprint. And it provides that guy with a blueprint for making a protein, one little tiny part of the protein. And it then will provide it another blueprint, the next one of these guys. So that what happens is that it gets a bunch of these guys hijacked, producing parts of the specimen. And so it can produce millions of part A of the specimen, millions of part B of the specimen, millions of part C of the specimen, all within a single cell, all involving the native product that exists as a plethora, as vast quantities of this exist throughout the entire cell, because this is the major workhorse for the cell. It does all of this transcription, it's called, which is to read the blueprint and make a protein. All right, it's that simple. And I'm finally able to cut off the heat here. Okay, so the specimen comes on in, it hijacks the cell, it fills the cell up with parts of the specimen until the cell gets so big that it rips open. This lysing, they call it, from the Greek, meaning to tear. It tears open the cell just on the sheer pressure of all of the little factories and the transcription factories that they've got going, making little specimen parts. And then as it is ripping open, you actually have a coordination up here in the ripping part that puts together all of those millions of pieces to make more specimens. This is why, for instance, there's a very high failure rate, that there's not that many specimens that come out that are complete and correct out of each one of these attacks. Is because the specimen is trying to do this as this cell wall ruptures in the lining of your throat or in your sinuses, that sort of little spiky feeling you get when a specimen's attacking you, is actually the cell, all these cells breaking open as they try and create more specimens. And let's just pick numbers. It's not meaningful, but they call this stuff, the ratio here is called a PFU. And it sounds a little funny, but it basically means how many of the particles can fuck you. They don't put it that way, right? But so out of the millions of little bits and pieces, how many does real specimens are actually created is the PFU. And our particular specimen here is very poor at this because it's a big critter. It's got to glue lots of parts together. And by the time it gets a few of them done, the rest of the parts that it's gotten created by that cell are now bluey. They're all spread out, or they're being attacked by the body, or they're being excreted one way or another, or they're dying because of inappropriate contact with saliva or whatever. So its ability to produce new specimens is way low. And so the percentages are like, you'll see them written out as like, 0.04, something like that, right? And you might get up into the 1.4, so 0.14. And so that's a percentage of these millions of specimens that are actually active. All the rest is garbage. Now, here's the problem. All of the rest of that, which is, as you see, these are percentages, by the way. So most of it, 99 point, all the garbage is still reactive to the tests. And not all of it, but a vast majority of it. Anything that contains components that go into the shell of the specimen will cause the PCR test to react. And a couple of the others, including one of the blood tests. So you got to be careful about that, because you may just be filled with particles because so if you encounter it, you got lots of vitamin D and it infects one cell, it's going to produce a lot of particles that may be picked up, but it may get no further than that one cell, just because the vitamin D takes care of it, because this thing is extremely vulnerable to vitamin D in the body. So now let's just remove this, go back to the discussion here. So the virus attacks the cell. The time component here is that you've got all these cells that line your body, and they're being attacked by the specimen. Damn it, I said the word, but they're being attacked by the specimen. And the specimen here attacks this cell. This cell has to rupture out to produce more specimens, and then they attack this cell ruptures out, and maybe because of the way it happens, maybe you get 10,000 specimens produced here, and they set about attacking 10,000 of your cells. That's why these specimens are so deadly, is because of the multiplicity. It's not divide, divide, divide. It's like infect, factory, and then boom, massive, massive assault. Okay, so, but nonetheless, this level here still represents a component of time. It's called a cascade response something. Okay, so in this particular coursework, they discuss all of this kind of stuff, but they never ever really get into the aspect of time is a component of how the specimens must work and how your body works to defend itself. So your body, when it has a specimen attack it in this first level, it's already starting to do stuff to protect even before this thing breaks open and creates these guys. So if you've got lots of vitamin D, it'll tag that thing, it'll know that it's a vitamin D issue, and it'll flush vitamin D into all of these areas here before that thing can launch those, and so none of the other cells get attacked, right? There's two aspects of this. In order for the specimen to attack your cells, the cells must be receptive. So the specimen, they say, can get in through your skin. Bullshit. It may be in your skin once you've inhaled it, but fundamentally the only way you can get the specimen is through the nostril or through the larynx. All right, you've got to get it to a moist area, and it has to be in the respiratory system. So I'm not going to get specimen on the top of my head and have it attack me. I can't get specimen off any surface. We didn't know this because Fauci lied, all right? They said asymptomatic spread was possible. They said it was possible to get it on your hands and then touch your face and get the specimen. Now, it is theoretically possible that a person who's so weak in vitamin D could get some specimen on them and then snort the specimen and induce an attack. But it's so highly unlikely as to fall into the category of basically impossible just walking around. And you know, you'd have to be probably so sick that you couldn't walk around, have to be so depleted of vitamin D in order to be made ill that way. Okay, so now getting back to the time component here. Your body is responding as these specimens are also mounting their attack. Your body is responding in a timed fashion, a deliberate timed fashion, that timing is going from cell to cell to cell to cell. Now, it's a cascade. So when this cell gets attacked, your body doesn't just tell the cell next to it, right? It tells all the cells around it in all of the different layers and then starts spreading that message. As all of those cells are told to start responding, then they also start triggering the product in order to be able to respond. But now this is native product. This is the native product that exists in your body, not the product that they're producing in the labs that they're trying to inject into you that has to be super cold. All right, so when I say the product here at this stage, I'm only referring to your native production of this particular material, which fills all of your cells. And it is used in this cascading time response approach to where these are the messengers that actually, the time it takes for them to come on up and grab this and start doing the protein, all of that, it's all factored into your body. And they overlook that in this course because they don't explicitly deal with time that way, except in a couple of small instances, but they don't go to the main point. Now let's talk about the engineered product, okay? So we'll call this E product. So E product here is this stuff right here extracted from your body, and it is made different and then shoved back into you. And that's what this whole inoculation program is all about, is to get you these E products, all right? The E product is manufactured, it's altered, it's hyper, and it recognizes, okay, so what happens here is you get an injection. Now, first off, note that between your cell walls, neither this native product nor the E product is allowed. So your body freaks out if it gets any of that product in between the cell walls. And if it shows up there, all kinds of bad things happen, and it has all these many mechanisms for destroying the product when it should break out of a cell. And that's what happens to all the little bits that both go to specimens and then are broken up, not able to be plugged into specimens, is that your body is freaking out about the product here getting out of the cell wall in the lysing process of the splitting open process, and it rushes all of these immune responses to get in there and clean up the scene. So this is really long-winded. I'm going to do 2 of these today too anyway. So this product here starts instantly teaching all of the other cells in the rest of your body, right? So if you get one of these jabs, some of the people, you'll see that they start getting red in where the jab was, and it starts spreading slowly over their entire body, this flushing, very much like they gulped a couple in niacin. But that flush from a niacin happens very rapidly. You get sort of, maybe itchy or a little tingly, and then it fades within an hour. This stuff from the jab is continuing day after day after day. It's growing, and it is indicative of a major problem because you're screwing with the product here. And what you're doing is the E product converts all of the native product into E product in all of these surrounding cells to some extent. We don't know how much of it converts. There's so much about this thing we just don't know. Anyway, so so here's where it gets into the nasty part of all of this, right? No matter what the effective infection rate of the specimen, I was going to say there's two aspects of this, receptive and permissive. Let me stop real quick. Your cell has to be receptive to being penetrated by the specimen, okay? No matter what kind of specimen it is. If it's not receptive, the specimen can't penetrate it. So the specimen, as I was saying, the specimen can't get through my skin on my head to make me ill. And then also there has to be the cell has to be permissive. So the cells in my nose and in my throat may be receptive because they're of the type that the specimen can attack. But they also have to be permissive in that they have to permit this thing to come through the protein barrier here on the cell wall. And that's vitamin D, all right? That's where vitamin D lives, is in that protective layer around the cell. So if I'm flush with vitamin D, the vitamin D prevents the permissiveness. So I may have some receptive cells, but they're not permissive, and so I won't get ill. Okay, so now, so we're getting back to the situation here. What happens with the E product is that it primes all of these cells right here, all throughout your whole body, so that all of the cells respond as soon as the first cell has one of the products hijacked. And so there's no time delay, or there's such a short time delay that all of the cells, this part of the process hasn't even happened yet. And all of these cells are responding. They're kicking up your immune system to fight something that is not there. And so that's why the cytokine storm, that's why the old people are dying and it's because of first contact with the specimen after the injection. Might be 2 weeks later, might be 3 weeks, might be several months. All right, so that's one aspect of this whole e-product business, okay? Now there's another aspect of this e-product business that's very, very nasty. The good news is, the very, 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 very good news is that, okay, so good news. The good news is that the e-product may make you infertile. It has a statistical likelihood of going that way. We can't rule it out. We have no level of knowledge as to how many people in any percentage it will make infertile. But the product is intimately involved in fertility because the product is how the cells replicate. And it's also how the reproductive organs create eggs and sperm. All right, and so the product is intimately involved in that. If you get E product in you, it is unknown how that will affect your fertility. But there are some small studies now that suggest infertility may be the most likely bad outcome. This is good news in my opinion because it means that there's a lower likelihood of potentially generational birth defects. So hopefully we're not walking down a road where we will see the problems from the E product materialize in these next generations. This is entirely unknown. This is the largest medical experiment ever undertaken. If they had done this in Nazi Germany, think of the repercussions. Think of what it would have been called. You know, mass culling and all of that kind of stuff. The fact that our social order is so wacko as to insist that the poorest and that our healthcare workers have it first, and that all the first responders have it first, that the army have it, and that all the dark-skinned people that are locked out of the healthcare system have it. It's like, holy fuck, people. This is the riskiest thing we've ever undertaken as a species. The single riskiest operation we've ever undertaken is the response to the specimen. The specimen building, it was built, paid for by Fauci and all of these other fuckers, and you can find a lot of other people to tell you exactly how that occurred. I'm not going to waste my time on that. The creation of bioweapons is a risky endeavor, but this particular response that we're having here now is the riskiest thing that humanity has ever done. And so way back when in my data sets, we had some horrific, terrible data sets. I mean, way back in like maybe 2004 or something, it started showing up. And it started going to the idea that there would be like 1/7 of humanity would die off in a relatively short period of time. Not like a year or two, but maybe over the course of, say, 10 years, something like that. This may be that point. So we may lose 1 billion people as a result of the specimen, the variance of the specimen, and its mutation, which it's now actively doing. It's learning to go from species to species, learning to attack us more, and so on. But also, it may be the response from the specimen. Now, here's the ugly part of all of this. If you get the jab, and you've got E product in you, that E product is part of all of your cells. So if you have unprotected sex, hell, if you have unprotected open mouth kissing with someone and you've had the E product develop in you, you can pass that on in those cells. Now, will it become effective of someone that receives those? We don't know. We just do not know. The people at the big pharma seem to think that that's the case because of the way that because of the language and some of the things that they've put out, okay, for their own purposes way the hell back when, 2012 onward, discussing these kind of things in response to specimens. And so there's some body of literature. It's small, but there is some body of scientific literature that suggests that E products, enhanced products in your cells, can be transmitted during sex. There's also some that you know for sure it can go in a blood transfusion, and it can't be filtered out of transfusions. So now is the blood supply tainted? And it goes on and on and on and on, right? So if you've got E product in you and you die and you're an organ donor, well, hey, you know, are you an effective organ donor or not? Because, you know, you got E product in you. So anyway, so I was particularly concerned about the potential for a crushing burden on our species over these next 20 years of birth defects. We're going to have enough burdens from climate and all this other stuff, and I wanted to not have that particular burden as long as we've got all this other shit we've got to deal with. So for me, it was good news that infertility is the most likely damaging outcome of the E product at that level. It can kill you, you know, because who knows with this pathogenic priming where all the cells react instantly, if that's going to be, you know, what's going to happen. At some point, if you become weak in vitamin D and you run into one of the specimens, will the E products come jumping out all over and cause a cytokine storm? That's the theory, and there does appear to be some level of manifestation in reality, but we don't know how much. Because here I'll go into the other half. I'll just try and keep this whole thing into a single video and go into the other half of this business. All right, so getting back to the mainstream media having their little problem here from February 24th onward. That's going to be as a result of the fact that they've been hiding all of we're going to need that cover your ass bit. They've been hiding all of this stuff about E product effects on human. You can't find it anywhere except alternative press, and they're doing everything they can to suppress it, and they're starting to do conspiracy theory kind of denigration on people bringing it up. But they're not laughing anymore. The mainstream media is not laughing at the anti-product people, right? And it's a complicated situation because they were anti-product when they thought the product might be labeled with Trump. You know, they didn't know how it was going to work out then. Anyway, though, so this MSM thing is really an interesting key. They're going to break down for a lot of different reasons. Not only the E product and its implications and the problems that it's going to cause and the fact that they've been pimping so that millions would get the jab, because it makes it look really bad. No matter, you cannot sell this any way to make it look good when this news comes out and becomes generally known that all it took was to get your ass on optimal vitamins, and you did not need to suffer the problems that they've induced with the jab here, right? All right, so there's that aspect of it. There's also the aspect of it that they've been covering up the pandemic part of it, and all this stuff is coming on out, and lots of people are now starting to know this and are starting to really abandon the MSM approach. That is to say, believing anything that these people put out. And in fact, now a lot of people are starting to actively go the opposite way. You know, if New York Times said it, it's got to be false, ergo I'd better do the other thing. Well, part of all of this is also going back into the other aspect of the sun thing, because of the weather. Because now they're going to have to start alibying not only the particular problems with the E product, but they're also going to have to start alibying their climate change scenario, which, you know, ask them, you run into any of these people in the MSM, you know, ask them, how's climate change working out for you? You know, how's it selling these days, right? Along with climate change, they're going to have to start alibying the whole greening, let's just say activist sale, a greening energy thing. Again, you know, ask Texas and all the other people yet to be affected how that's going to work out for them. Now let's stop and divert for a second and say, it's pretty nice here at the moment. We've got a little bit of sun, we've got some sun breaks, but we had hellacious winds yesterday. I wasn't in the area. I came back and there had been like at least a dozen major tree falling episodes up and down the state highway I live on. Okay, so state highway, they got crews out here, they cleared it up, but we're talking logs that you got to get your big chainsaws out to go through. We're talking, you know, 120-foot high firs and massively thick spruce and this kind of thing coming down in the winds because we'd had snow and so forth. And then we get this giant windstorms yesterday with very heavy air in the form of all of this moisture and cold. Okay, so that's your feeder band that'll be hitting the middle of the country probably Wednesday or Thursday. And then there's another one. All right, so we're looking at it right now. We can see it offshore. It's moving down from the north and sort of swirling, and it'll be moving onshore a little bit. So it looks like there's going to be at least 2 more episodes of cold, polar vortex-driven, heavy air. And I've only lived in this particular part of the coast for 3 years, but in those 3 years, we've never had a windstorm like this. We've had big windstorms. For instance, it's known area, you know, known for winds. I had to have my windows rated to stand 133 pounds per square inch pressure for X number of minutes, right? Just what insurance calls for around here. But this was a big windstorm, and it's very heavy air, and it's just pushed all these trees over. So it's going to come on in. It's going to beat the rest of the country. So they're gonna. So right in here, and this is like, let's see, we're not even into the 24th yet. Okay, so on top of all of this issue that seems to be arising around that time, we've got these issues that are already starting to pop up for them right now, and now we've also got the second aspect of this, around on the 24th here, which let me use green, might as well, which is going to be the currencies. Okay, so there's all kinds of economic activity going on as people relocate. And so our people are moving out of our cities. This is the abandonment of empire internally. They may be leaving the country externally at some point, but at the moment, the driving force for all of that activity is the degradation of the dominant currency on the planet. It's going to corrode from the outside in. We're seeing that corrosion already collapse ancillary currencies that are piggybacked on top of it, as we see in Kenya, as we've seen in Venezuela, et cetera, et cetera. We see these currencies that are all starting to come to their end, and the dominant currency, the world reserve currency, is itself coming to its sad end. Let's do it this way. Its sad end. That is another one of these things that the MSM is going to have to deal with post the 24th. There's a lot of the economic stuff. If you want to see how it's going to unravel, it's basically going to be bank to bank, and then ultimately bank, 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 up to central bank, and then central bank to central bank, and then while it's at that level, government bonds are going to go all over the place. And when they do that, then backing on currency is going to get really, really, really wonky in terms of, you know, what's theoretically backing the currencies. Because if the bonds go, then, I mean, theoretically, it's the bonds that back our US dollar and also student debt, which are all rolled up and formed into basically a big giant bond. And so when this all happens, so for instance, if we get into, just figure it this way, if you go and look, you'll see that the Federal Reserve has student debt as one of the assets that they use, that they record on their balance sheet. So what if I were to give a student that had $100,000 in debt a silver round, right? And say, or a stack of 20 silver coins. And so those coins, what if, because of hyperinflation, those 20 coins become equal to his $100,000 in debt? And I just gave it to him because they weren't that expensive to me at the time that I purchased them. Then you see the impact that this can have. People could go in and pay off student debts with the conversion of hyperinflation into a real asset by selling it, and then take those hyperinflated dollars and pay off their nominal student debt with, you know, storehouses of silver and so on. We may yet see a 1-to-1 ratio between silver and gold. So whatever silver gets to, in fact, I actually think it'll do better than that. I think that gold will go up and silver will surpass it. And that at some point the ratio, which is like, I think it's like 67 or something ounces of silver to the 1 ounce of gold now, that ratio will continue to decrease, and then we'll have a 1-to-1, we'll have parity between silver and gold, and then because of the nature of silver, it will become more valuable. And we'll proceed from there. But as that process takes place, the currencies are going to come under a great deal of strain, and we will probably see lots of currencies collapse and generalized financial chaos. And the mainstream media is going to find that people will not listen to their explanations. And in fact, we're probably going to come to that point in time where our forecast issues for reporters, people that work, let's just say faces that work for the mainstream media, run into real problems ever leaving their apartments, you know, ever going out of their house, doing any kind of travel. It won't be safe for them to move without a lot of bodyguards. At some point, the bodyguards will turn on them. It's going to be really ugly, but it is actually going to be very freeing for us, for the populace. Okay, so this is going to be a good thing, even though it's going to be a lot of bad things to get there. And I think that this currency crash and all of this kind of stuff is going to begin this next month. It will take some number of months. It's not an overnight kind of a thing. And so you will have some period of time to react to it and get yourself ready and so on. But bear in mind that we've been hamstrung, as has been demonstrated by what's happened to Texas. So Obama administration shut down I think almost all or lots of the clean coal-fired electrical plants here in the United States. There were a lot of them in Texas. Obviously, if Texas had clean coal-fired plants or natural gas electricity making plants, they would be able to continue to produce electricity, even though the windmills are jammed up with ice and are not likely to be very effective under the current conditions. And the whole greening activist energy thing and the activists themselves, the climate change activists, are now being blown out by reality and the manifestation of the ice age. So as we get into this ice age, if you can survive all of the rest of it, if you can survive the E product and you don't get the jab and all that kind of stuff, or if you get the jab, you maintain your vitamin D and work and so on, we've still got the climate change to deal with, the ice age. But due to where we are in our cosmic journey here on this planet, a lot of the illusions are falling away and revealing us with the woo, right? The stuff that was disacknowledged, that was hidden, that was called conspiracy theory, that was, turned into laughing stock and points of derision. It was used to slice and dice and further separate humanity. But as I say, as we go forward here, as MSM falls to the side, your friends and neighbors will come to you and you can say, hey, you're in the woo with the rest of us now, right? You got to understand that the paradigm, the structured reality that was sold to you by mainstream media was just that. It was a sales job, it was structured, and it was not reality. It was an artificial construct. It was an illusion. It was Maya. They pulled a veil over your eyes. This is a very terrible thing to have to come to grips with. So your friends and neighbors, as they come to grips with, ice storm, no power, and collapsing economy, and the lies about the pandemic, and the hiding of the real facts about the specimen and where it came from and stuff. As all of that comes on out, there's everything else behind it to come on out, and all of the stuff about the space aliens. And the very last thing to note is that I put it out on my Twitter feed about the fact that the U.S. government has responded to a Freedom of Information Act and request, and seemingly actually provided real data that they indeed do have debris and pieces from shot down UFOs. So now there can be other FOIA requests to get more details now that we know some of the language they're using, and it will become that much easier as we go forward for all of this stuff to sort of spill out. But in any event, so the point of this was to bring up the issues about the specimen and the place we're at now relative to the mainstream media. I think the mainstream media will be, by the 25th of March, by the end of the next 30 days, be involved in their own cover your ass march, I don't know, or cover their ass, circle the wagons kind of an effort, and will be far less effective as salespeople as more and more people discover that they were lied to and that the mainstream media is not their friend and has sold them a complete packaged, take it out of the box, put it in the microwave reality. And that doesn't taste good, it's cardboard, and it's not actually living up to the hype. This will probably, as I say, come out due to some further nastiness that will evolve around the E product. I gotta let you go, it's been an hour, and I gotta get back to the work that I should be doing. Okay, live long and prosper. We have many, many opportunities for that to come forward. In chaos, there is opportunity.